Hi everyone, it's Shannon here for Heffy Doodle. In this video, we are going to create this fun shadow box card, and we're going to use some sets that aren't necessarily fall themed, but with a little bit of tweaking, they're going to be perfect for today's card. I'm going to start with the big shadow box die. This is an awesome die that makes it really easy to create a really thick shadow box, which allows you to add lots of layers and create lots of dimension. I used the largest die from that set to die cut 2 pieces of 110-pound white cardstock, so some heavyweight cardstock. These 2 pieces here are going to form our actual shadow box, and you can see the die creates some score lines. This is going to be our front panel right here between the edge and that first score line. So I'm going to center this other die from the big shadow box die set in that front area, and then I'll die cut it, and that will create the window for our scene. So now I'm going to move on to creating some of the layers. I have some leftovers from when I die cut my box, and I'm not going to grab this die here from the big shadow box die set, and I'm going to die cut this scrap, but I'm not going to die cut it all the way. I'm going to do a partial die cut, so I'm going to take my top plate here, and I'm not going to cover the die completely. I'm going to stop short just about 1/4 inch from the bottom part of the die, and that basically is going to prevent that area from being cut. And so now I'm going to have a longer layer, or a taller layer, for my shadow box. I'm now going to move on to my other scrap here, and for this I'm just going to die cut this little scrap just like normal. So I just centered it there and ran it through my die cutting machine. Now I have my 2 layers. I'm going to turn my smaller layer into kind of a grassy layer. So I have this other die from the big shadow box die set. I'm just going to position it here, use a piece of tape to hold it in place, and then I'll run it through my die cutting machine. Now it only cut part of the front, so I'm going to position it once more and kind of line it up to the very edge of where the last die cut was, and then run it through my die cutting machine. And now I have this kind of grassy layer for this. Will actually be more in the foreground, and the other one will be in the back. Now I'm going to move on to just adding some color. I have some Distress Oxides picked out for this. I'm just going to start with Mowed Lawn, just do some simple ink blending. I am going to create a little gradation, and I want it to be a little bit lighter at the top and darker at the bottom. So I started kind of light with the ink at the top, and then got heavier towards the base. And as you can see, for that back layer, I'm going to do the same ink as I did. I'm just going to use that Mowed Lawn and also create a little gradation, lighter at the top and darker at the base. So now that I've finished those layers, I'm going to move on to these trees. I die cut these trees with the Forest Builder die set. Just die cut them out of some white cardstock. I'm going to start with the trunks here and ink blend them with Frayed Burlap, also creating a little gradation on them. For the trees, I'm going to use a red, yellow, and orange, starting with my orange, which is Spiced Marmalade, create a little gradation on that, and I'll do the same for all the trees. The next is my yellow, which is Mustard Seed, and then I'll finish up my final tree with Barn Door. Once I finish ink blending these trees, I'm going to set them aside, and I'm going to move on to ink blending my sky on my shadow box. So here's my 2 pieces for my shadow box. This is the back piece, and I wanted to point out here that the tab on this piece is a little long since I added that big window, so I will have to trim that off about a little bit over 1/4 inch, so the remaining tab is a little bit less than 1/4 inch. And now I'm just going to fold it here, and this back is where I'm going to ink blend my sky. I'm going to grab a piece of painter's tape just to kind of mask off the other side, just to keep things neat, and I'm going to use Tumbled Glass Distress Oxide and just ink blend a really simple kind of cloudy sky. I just kind of ink blend unevenly, and this will create the illusion of kind of a blue sky with some puffy clouds in the background. So now that I finished ink blending my sky, I'm actually going to stamp my sentiment. But I did trim off camera that tab there, so now it's a little bit shorter than 1/4 inch, and now it'll fit behind the edge of the front window. So I'm going to stamp my sentiment. This is the Hot Diggity Dog Stamp Set. I'm going to use some images from that set later, but I'm going to stamp my sentiment first. I did use my front panel to help me center my sentiment, and then I just inked it up with Versafine Onyx black ink and then stamped it onto my back panel. And now moving on to my images. Again, these images are from the Hot Diggity Dog Stamp Set. I am stamping them onto Bristol Smooth paper. That's because I'm going to do some very simple coloring with my Tombow dual brush pens. Now this image here has some little details in it's actually a mound of dirt, and I want to not stamp those. So I cut a little teeny 2 little teeny strips out of a full stick post-it note, placed it over those little areas on that image, and now I'm going to ink up my stamp like I normally would. Then I will remove those little pieces of post-it tape or post-it note, and then I'm ready to stamp my dogs. And now I've removed those little details in the dirt, and I can kind of fill them in with leaves. And I'm going to use this Quill You Be Mine stamp set because it has 2 little leaves in that set. I'm going to position my leaves in that dirt mound. I'm going to turn this dirt mound now into a leaf mound, and I'm going to start simply by inking them up in Versafine Onyx black ink and stamping them. Then I went ahead and created 2 little masks with that full adhesive post-it note and trimmed them down, and I'm placing them over those leaves that I just stamped. Now I'm going to reposition those leaves, ink them up again, and stamp them, and that will start to create the illusion of one leaf over the other and the other one behind it. I'll remove the masks, and I'm now going to stamp one more leaf one more time. So I did place down the mask again, and I'll ink that leaf up and then stamp it, and that will complete that little leaf mound. I'll just remove that mask here, and then I'll hold it to the camera so you can get a good look. So that's a really simple little tweak here to the image, that now this doesn't look like a dirt mound anymore, it looks like a pile of leaves, so it'll work really well for our fall theme. I went ahead and stamped the leaves a couple more times because I'm going to use those later for the other dog, and now I'm going to move on to coloring these images in. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to use Tombow dual brush pens. I like to start with my marker direct to paper, kind of put down some of that ink, and then with a only slightly wet, but just damp brush, I will go over that ink, and that activates that ink, and I can kind of spread it around and create a gradation. I just finished his nose, and now I'm going to go back over that puppy dog there and darken some of the dark areas. They just kind of were looking a little flat, and then blend it out with my damp brush. I'm now going to move on to the leaves. I have again an orange, a red, and a yellow picked out, and I'm just going to quickly color the base of the leaf with that, and then blend it out with my damp brush to create a little gradation on all those leaves. The Bristol paper makes creating these gradations really easy. The paper is so smooth and your ink just glides over, and it's really easy to create these soft gradations. I'm now going to color the rest of the leaf mound. I have kind of a brown picked out, colored the base, and now I'm just blending it out so it's a little bit lighter at the top. And now I'm going to finish up with that little bit of grass that you see at the image. I'm going to use Mowed lawn just to keep everything consistent, and this bottom bit will just kind of blend into our layers. I'm just going to quickly color that in with my damp brush, and once I finish that, I'm going to color the other puppy dog off camera, and then I went ahead and die cut these out with the matching dies. I'm now going to reinforce or rescore all the score lines that the die creates on the cardstock. I do this whenever I have score lines from a die. I just find it makes kind of assembling my card or whatever it is I'm making a lot easier. Now I went ahead and added some score tape to all my pieces because I'm ready to put this together. I added a bit of score tape to the inside of that front tab, and now I'm showing you I added a 1/8 of an inch of score tape, so a little thin score tape to that little tab that we trimmed down so it can fit behind the front window. I just removed the backing on that first tab, and I'm just going to connect my 2 pieces together here. And now I'm almost ready to put this together. It comes together really quickly, but all I need to do now is add in my layers. I find it's a little bit easier to add my layers in before I actually kind of close up my shadow box. So I just removed the score tape on the tabs for each one of my layers, and those tabs were actually created by the die that I used to cut them. And then I'm going to remove the score tape on the other side of those layers, and then remove that score tape on my actual shadow box. And before I close up my shadow box, I am going to attach the layer to the other side of the shadow box, kind of tweak it here or go back and forth till I get that layer perfectly parallel with the front of the card, and then I will close this shadow box up. And you can already see all the dimension and how thick this shadow box is. I could have done several more layers. I just did 2 to keep it kind of simple, but this is going to make such a fun card to pull out an envelope. I'm sure the recipient is going to be so surprised when this pops up out of the envelope and this scene is revealed. I'm now going to finish it up with my images and my remaining die cuts. I'm going to first glue down the dog that's in the leaf pile into that first layer. Then I'll move on to one of the trees and use that red tree and just glue that down to the second layer or the middle layer. Then I'll move on to my yellow tree. I'm actually going to glue that to the background, so the layer that we ink blended the sky on. Then I'll just adjust that red tree so you can see the yellow one a little bit better. Then glue down my orange tree. And now I'm going to move on to that other puppy dog. Now, you might remember that we made all those leaves. Well, I went ahead and cut some acetate into thin strips and glued down my leaves onto those thin strips of acetate. Now I'm going to arrange them here so that they're kind of around the head of the dog, so it looks like the dog is throwing those leaves up in the air. I used a little piece of tape to kind of hold those leaves in place, and now I'm using some glue just to get some glue on top of those strips of acetate and a little bit under to kind of hold them all in place. Then I'll let that glue sit for just a bit, and then I'll remove the tape, and I'm now ready to add this dog to the scene. Just going to add a little bit of glue down to his lower half and then stick him down on that front layer, and that will actually complete my card. I'll now hold my card up to the camera so you can get a good look at all the details, the layers and depth in this card. I love creating shadow box cards. They're so fun to create a little scene. I just love it. And this one is just so cute with these puppy dogs and playing in the leaves, and I think it's pretty cool that it wasn't necessarily a fall set, but with just a little bit of tweaking we were able to really get a fall theme. And you can see here it folds down, so it'll actually fit in an A2 envelope, which is awesome. And it folds down pretty flat because it's just about like at the most 4 layers of cardstock, so not too bad. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If you'd like any more information on the products I use, please check out the links below in the description. And thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day.